other volunteers who are interested in this program so that they can enjoy the training as well. We'll post the recording to Schoology, and if any of you would like to have access just to review, let us know. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Youth Education Mentorship Program. So hopefully that's what you guys are all excited to be here about. I decided to kick us off with a little bit of music. If you didn't see in the chat there, we regularly have to drive students to and from programs, and one of my most requested playlists is the Swahili Hits playlist on Spotify. So give you guys a little taste of that. I enjoy a car full of 7 to 8 kids all screaming along to a Swahili song that I don't understand. It's fun. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brandon White. I am the Director of Education here at NICE. I am joined by Elizabeth Harrington. Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm the volunteer and training coordinator here. I'm about a month into this role, but I first joined NICE. I was doing the youth summer camp program. So I spent my summer with the kind of wonderful children that Brandon was just mentioning about that really love their Swahili music. And it was a really great time. I already miss working with those kids. So I'm really excited for you all to get a taste of what that was like and hopefully learn as much from them as I did.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We're really excited to have all of you so interested in this program. Just to recap a little bit from our orientation, NICE serves 3 particular groups among our community here in Davidson County: refugees, asylees, and immigrants. And we use those categories very specifically to refer to people who have been through the formal refugee resettlement process through the UNHCR. People who either have applied for asylum or have received asylum may qualify for services, or simply immigrants, many of whom in our case may be undocumented, especially in this particular program, as you'll hear tonight a little bit about the SIFE program. But we serve all kinds of new arrivals to the United States. So with this program in particular, we're going to dive deeper into a program called SIFE, S-I-F-E. So sorry. Hold on one second. We are going to dive into a program called SIFE, which stands for Students with Interrupted Formal Education. That is a program in Metro Nashville Public Schools that exists as an elementary, middle school, or high school program for students who have gaps in their formal education. So they may have had intermittent access to formal schooling. They may have no access to formal schooling. And through that process, they have developed significant skill gaps. So students in the SIFE program have very low literacy. They tend to have low numeracy. They might not understand fully the norms and expectations of a school. And so there's lots of barriers that exist for that population. Once students exit out of SIFE in the high school level, they can enter into a program called RAEL, which stands for Recently Arrived English Learners. And this is basically a crash course to get older students with very little time to graduate as much service as possible before they exit out of mandatory schooling and have to go into either adult education services or the workforce. As I mentioned, most of the students in these programs are refugees and asylees. We do often have a high population of undocumented students that are in SIFE who have come into the United States very recently and have no skills and lots of cultural barriers. Another group of people that we serve are children of our adult education clients. So our adult education clients are people who want to further their education and are also English language learners and recent arrivals. Some of them tend to be a little more established. So students in your program that are referred from adult education may actually have more skills than some of these other groups because their families have likely been here longer. For a lot of adults who are recent arrivals, their primary focus is to get income. And so furthering their education is not always a possibility until they feel more established, more safe, and more financially secure. So just to look at a profile of what our students are really capable of, almost all of our students are extremely low literacy. Elizabeth can attest to that. Working with the summer program, we have middle schoolers who are still learning letter sound recognition and the alphabet. And so literacy is the single most important academic skill. And we will talk a little bit more about that later in the training this evening. But most of the research suggests that um, to be successful in an intervention for SIFE students in particular, literacy is the core skill that's necessary to get to graduation. And just for your purposes, for any of you who really like research and data, about 90% of SIFE students do not finish high school with a diploma. So they either age out or they just simply don't finish school and drop out. So that's a 10% graduation rate among this population. That's a very stark statistic to be up against. And without our agency, it would be worse. So they're lucky to have you all stepping in to help as mentors. Most of our students are low income. I would say we have an increasing population of moderate income in our youth education program, but typically we have low income or very low income students. All of our students are basic skills deficient, which means those critical academic skills are just not in their wheelhouse. And again, that's part of the fact that they have had interrupted access to formal education. If they are a refugee coming out of camp, unless you are a high school student, school is not mandatory, by the way. And if you are lucky enough to have access to school as an elementary school or middle schooler, it typically happens outside, contingent on things like weather or environmental factors. And so you don't have school every day of the week. And most likely you're not with a teacher, you're with a community member who has an interest in your education. And so the quality of that education is also something that's not reliable. These students also face massive cultural barriers. Just being in a brick and mortar school for the first time is different for most of them. They may be coming with some understanding of US based schooling or mostly little to no understanding of US based schooling. They get a crash course from us and what's to be expected of them by their teachers and administrators in the school system. But other than that, this is all new to them. So part of your ability as a mentor and the push that we want for you all to be working on with your students is just helping them navigate the school system. Things like field trips and field trip forms are new to these students. Um, Things like special events, like family engagement activities, like open house. We have staff members that didn't know what open house was because they haven't been in the United States for schooling until we explained it to them. So there's just a lot of those things we may take for granted as people. You may have gone through the US school system yourself, you may not have, but a lot of these cultural customs are things we take for granted in our school systems as we grow up. So it's a unique problem that our students face to not really be aware of um, what to expect, even if it's like getting in a line to go to the cafeteria, for example. That's probably new for a lot of your students. And as we've learned over the last 16 months, these students are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Their families are getting hard hit, their income has been affected. People have lost their lives within this population group. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. So this, by the way, is a picture of us taking a bunch of middle schoolers to a Nashville soccer club game, actually the inaugural Nashville soccer club game. We sat in some nosebleed seats, and the whole time they complained about how cold they were and that they were afraid they were going to fall off the stadium. But it was great, and they had a lot of fun. So in working with this program, you're likely to meet 3 other individuals, so myself included, that are a strong part of this department. One would be Halima Ingabire, who's the Youth Education Associate Manager. She is responsible for our RSIG program, which is the Refugee School Impact Grant. So if you have a student who's a refugee, asylee, Haitian or Cuban entrant, or another one of the qualified groups in her program, she might be helping you with getting them on support services or helping connect them to school-based services. Another is the person you'll work with the most often, Hana Mwansa. And Hana is the mentorship coordinator. So she will be responsible for pairing each one of you with a family She'll also be the person that you report to about how that is going. We'll talk about how you do that tonight. She's also a resource for you all. If you have a need for lesson plans or curriculum or activities to be doing with your mentee, if you have a need to report a concern about a family, she'll be the person that you go to. And we'll unpack all of that this evening. Right now, there are 3 ways that each of you can mentor a refugee student. One would be virtually. So we understand that there is an ongoing public health crisis. And so if you only feel comfortable offering services virtually, we wanted to respect that and give you that opportunity. It's up to Hannah to find the best family to meet that need. So it may be a best option for those of you who are unvaccinated or have underlying health concerns, or for people who might lack access to transportation. You wouldn't have to meet a student on the ground. But I do want to encourage everyone to consider a few things. The access to technology and understanding of technology among our population are very low. We've been teaching students how to turn on computers, the fact that they need to be continuously plugged in or they will die, where the power button is, what a password is. So asking them to meet us virtually is a climb for most of our students. If that is a way that you are comfortable mentoring, Hannah will be the one to do an in-home visit and establish that client relationship for you, and help equip that client to meet you in virtual space. So we do have mechanisms for that. But I want you to consider that the limitations of that virtual space are quite high. So there are some things you can't help a student with virtually. For example, we had a mentor help their mentee learn to ride a bike for the first time, even though they were 15 years old. So there's just all kinds of things that you can do in person that you can't online. I think we all understand that. I would also say that students are overwhelmingly disinterested in meeting on the computer. So if you do want to practice your mentorship opportunity virtually, I would encourage you to be the exciting thing that brings the kids to the computer, because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to get them coming back. So come prepared, come with lots of ideas around what the students' interests are, and really try to meet them where they are as best as possible if we can't meet them where they are physically. There are 2 other options for those of you who are willing to be in person. One would be mentorship in the home. This is our traditional method of service. So most of our mentors will meet families inside of their own homes. This does encourage a sense of vulnerability for students. They're more willing to take risks in their own home. They're more willing to have a sense of security and safety, which can help to form those lasting relationships that are so pivotal. And we'll talk a little bit more tonight about how those relationships really help refugees in particular. And it's the best option for those of you who might want to do the fun part of supporting life skills, because inside the school, you may not have that same opportunity. So if you want to be able to do things like teach them how to ride a bike at the same time you're helping them with their homework, or help them with some of those kind of hidden gem things, the home is really the best place for that. But there are also a set of considerations here. You must have at least one other adult in the home with you. Typically, that means you have to meet the family when the parents are home, or sometimes auntie, uncle, neighbor can be there as well. That's most of the time our kids are not watched by their own parents because their parents work double shifts. The scheduling for this is both based on your availability and the family's availability, which can be a little tricky and can be subject to change. So for someone who wants to do in-home mentorship, you also have to be a person who is excited by change and adaptability, because that is likely going to happen in that scenario. It also requires more responsibility and respect as you are a guest in someone's home. We do say that for an in-home opportunity, you must have transportation. A lot of the apartment complexes our families live in do have bus lines, so it is possible to take the bus, but it's very time consuming and it's not often on their route. And it would likely be nights or weekends for your availability, just so everyone knows. The last way that you're able to mentor currently is inside the school building. So you can serve as a mentor to high need students during the school day. Teachers are going to be selecting individual students for whom this is a need, and you will meet with them during class time. Now, the great part about this is it's very easy for those of you who might want a standard schedule. This is written on the wall. There's no risk that the family won't be there. There's no risk that you have to coordinate time with the family on a regular basis because you're meeting them when the kids are already in the building. It does mean that you wouldn't have a strong relationship with the entire family, which a lot of people enjoy about mentorship. Um, but if you have an interest in working in a school setting someday or education as a field in general, this is a great choice because a lot of the activities for this kind of mentorship are going to be more focused on lessons, activities that are handed down to us from the school system. There's a new social emotional curriculum called So to Grow that we'll be working on with students. So we'll be pulling them out of class to do activities from that curriculum. And then our own, as I mentioned before, Halima and Gabira, our associate manager, is going to be putting together art therapy lessons for mentors who are interested in working during the school day. So they get to do some art activities with a therapeutic lens for those students as well. So it's a little more structured in what you're expected to do, but it has the most structure. So for those of you who like that structure, it's a good choice. A few considerations here. You do have to pass a fingerprint background check to be eligible to work during the school day. The content will include those social emotional lessons from So to Grow, like I mentioned. And you might be serving small groups and individual clients. Now, because of that, the shifts are a little shorter. They're not a full 2 hours every time you would meet with a student. And for that reason, you're really doing a split shift. So what we mean by that is you're touching base with the student during the school day, but throughout the week, you might be messaging them and saying, hey, did you do your homework tonight? Have you been reading? What's going on? Try to maintain an informal relationship one-to-one with the student you've been paired with so that you're establishing that long-lasting relationship outside of school time as well, since this is a more structured, more educational mentorship opportunity. Are there any questions about these types of mentoring before we move forward?
Do we only do one of the three, or can you do a little all of them, or how does that usually go?
Yeah, you could definitely do a little of all of them. I think that it's up to you and the family to discuss what's best. In terms of the in-home at school options, you would need to be available during the school day when teachers have approved us to be in the building. So that could be a barrier to kind of blending some of these. But let's say you were available from, and we'll look at the actual schedule here in a moment, but let's say you were available from 12 to 12:45 on a weekday and also wanted to go and do home visits with the family, that would be fine. We just need to make sure that you've met the family, that they've signed a waiver, because not all students we meet in the school building are going to have a waiver with their parents saying we can come into the home to do activities with them. So we just have to work that out with the respective family. But anything that you're willing to contribute, we are willing to find a way for. The minimum requirement is 2 hours a week for this program. But if you have more time and you really want to invest in the lives of our students, we're excited about that and would love to try to fit you into any or all of these boxes. And, for the virtual box, that may be as simple as checking in with someone about their homework or, things going on in school as a kind of out of school time to supplement that in school opportunity. We could definitely help set that up. Any other questions? And it is perfectly fine if you're only able to do one of these options. Great. Well, let's move forward. So this is that aforementioned schedule that I mentioned. So right now, this is a little reiterative because we only have one school that we're working in, which is Glencliff High School. As we get more mentors, we will expand our services over to John Overton High School. both schools have a SIFE program, so the populations are very similar, and we resettle students that end up in both of those programs. So we will work with John Overton at some point. We just don't have enough mentors right now to be in both schools at once. So just to let you guys know, we got the block schedule from the teachers, and their first class of the day would be from 8:30 to 9:45. Second class would be from 9:50 to 11:10. And then there's an option in the afternoons called PLT, which is like a learning community for the students that's only 40 minutes. So you could even go during that block. So if you're available during any of these windows of opportunity, let Elizabeth know, and if you're interested in working in the school, we'll get you plugged into one of these times of the day. I think the 12 to 12:40 block is going to have more of an art therapy lens, whereas the 8:30 and 9:50 blocks are going to be literacy heavy on certain days of the week. So the way that it works is they rotate through. They're in an inclusion classroom, so they don't get to go to like everybody else's social studies class. They don't get to go to the general language arts class. They are in the SIFE language arts class, or they're in the SIFE math class. So it's all students who know very little English and are learning at the same pace. So the way we support those programs is when it's their day to be in language arts, we do read with them and do literacy activities. When it's their day to be in social studies, we actually do like community activities where we're helping them understand those culturally relevant modules. So you might be teaching them about like the library, or teaching them about a number of different culturally relevant things. One thing that the school system wants to see this year is that all the high school students be able to pass the naturalization test for whatever reason. So we have some curriculum for that because we teach adults to go through that process. So you might be teaching them some civics, for example, if that's the day that you pick. And then also during math time, because the math teacher feels like the most relevant thing, and I agree, is their social, emotional, and mental health, we actually will be digging into those social emotional lessons from So to Grow. So that's a little breakdown of how this looks on the ground. But in general, our mentorship program is designed to combine the things on this chart. So we try to meet the basic, most critical needs of the entire family at the same time that we're meeting those academic and social needs of the student and trying to help the entire family attain long-term self-sufficiency. So a big part of this program is providing that mentee with the things they need to be successful lifelong. And that may be different for each student in the program. For some students, it might be that they lack time management. For some, it might be that they really don't have the digital skills to be successful in today's workforce. And so getting to know your students is going to be very important for understanding what their pathway to long-term self-sufficiency looks like, and how that does create bi-generational stability for their family, how they're affecting change in their family by having a pathway to long-term self-sufficiency. So with that, let's look at the scope of services that we provide in our mentorship experience. And again, this is an overview. It does correlate directly to the reporting that we ask you to do. We'll talk about that tonight. But there's a lot of ways to do each of these activities that we're going to cover. The expectation is not that you do all of these things all the time, but that we're working them into the relationship between you and the student as the mentorship on kind of builds. So one is that we provide our students with academic support. This is sort of the bread and butter of our mentorship program, right? The majority of what you'd be doing is helping them with their school assignments and homework. So they might have a long-term project, they might have a presentation. At that point, they need some kind of support to get that submitted on time. I would say as part of this, it's important to also introduce those students to your own academic interests. Share with those students your own passions, because that's how they grow passionate, by witnessing passionate people and seeing what long-term academic interests look like. A lot of their family members probably didn't go to school in the same way that we have. And so it's really exciting, I think, to share the things that matter to us. And you might be surprised how students are willing to kind of adapt and grow their own interests when they see that you have academic interests of your own. One of the biggest things is supporting them in learning about subjects which interest the student. So share with the students, with your mentee, your own academic interests, but as a mirror to that, learn about their interests. They may not have interests yet, right? So going through their homework with them, going through academic assignments, try to pay close attention to what they're good at, what excites them, what they're naturally into, and grow that interest. They may not even realize it is an interest, right? So help them learn what interests them. And then again, that most important skill is to support language development. So some of the things you can be doing with students on a regular basis, let's say they don't have homework this week and you're not sure what to do, get a book out and read with them, right? Get a piece of paper and write with them. Most of our students can't write a 5-paragraph essay. They can't even write a paragraph. So getting them to write about one thing for multiple sentences is a great start. Some of them may just be working on writing their letters and naming their letters, or writing words and drawing pictures to them. So you have to really be willing to get to know these students and meet them where they are. Um, Another domain of language development is speaking and listening. And so practicing speech and listening is really important. Listening is easy when we're slowed down and intentional with our language. So, hi, how are you today? A lot of our students can listen and understand that, but that's not realistic to the life they're going to face. So helping them by slowing down your own language and being intentional and talking to them and practicing speaking and listening is great. But you might also want to hop on YouTube and have them watch a television show in English and try to help them translate it. Try to help them walk through like what's happening. Ask them questions about it. Who's the main character of this story? What are they going through? What's the problem in this scene? What's the person asking for? Listening to real world content is very hard for language learners. I was just doing this before the training to kind of get my head in the mindset of it. I was listening to a YouTube video of like intermediate Spanish listening exercises, and they're hard. And I tested a fluent Spanish level. So this skill is not easy. There's a lot of resources. If you go and just type in like listening activities or exercises in YouTube, you're going to find a ton of things that you could work through this with your mentee about, or you can kind of create your own. You can ask them to listen to a conversation on the radio or watch TV together. There's just a lot of possibilities, but encouraging reading, writing, speaking, and listening, each one of these skills reinforces the others. So they're all really important to language development. We also have a resource called Light Sail Education. Now, we have a limited number of seats in Light Sail Education, but this is a web-based reading platform. And students for whom there is a huge literacy deficit are going to be given access to this program. More than likely, all of you will have a student in this at the beginning because we have lots of space to bring kids in. But the way this works is it's basically a smart book library. So I'm going to pull it up and show you. Each student will be given an access, a sign-in that's unique to them. We'll standardize the passwords just to make it easy for everyone. But when they log in, they can do this from their phone. They can do it from a tablet. They can do it from a computer. Most of the time, our students don't have access to anything but a phone, or you may have to try to get your computer or tablet or phone and bring it with you so they can be reading when you're together with your student. This is an example of the dashboard, but what I really want to show you is the book library. So when students go in, they'll see this. It's literally thousands of book options. And up here in the very middle, you can filter the option. If you're given a student who's in Light Sail, we will tell you what is called their Lexile range. This is their reading level. It's a number that's been assigned to them based on some reading they will do with us before they go into the program. And let's just say, because I know our students, that most of them are going to be reading between 0 and 75. I think I've seen a student in our program get as high as 400. That's still considered early emergent reading level. So the people in our program are reading at a very low level. And this will actually give you a great idea of that. So when you see a book that says BR, by the way, it means beginner reader. It means there is no level. Let's open up this one about baby pandas, because why not? I could use a baby panda right now. When you do click on the book, it's going to give you information about it, including the page number, what kind of book it is, a little summary of the story, and then you can click read to check out the book. When you do that, go through the story with the student. Look at the cover. What do you see? What do you think the book is going to be about? Ask lots of questions. You can see the story here is very easy. She is a baby panda. If there's highlighted text, it means there's a video explaining this word because they don't expect the student to know it already. So when you click it, it's going to show a video of a baby panda. Great. Awesome. And you can talk about like this is a newborn or young panda, right? In some of the harder stories, when you have highlighted text, it gives you a definition of the word. But in this case, for the beginning readers, they're not going to be able to read the definition. So it's more helpful to have a video. At some point in the story, you see there's very minimal writing. At some point in the story, words will be left out. When a word is left out, it is an assessment of the student's reading. So they have to pick the best word to go in that sentence before they can move forward. And what that does is it gives us an idea of whether or not their reading is growing. And the program naturally assesses the student as they go, and their stories will start to get harder. If they do improve in their reading language and can start to read harder books, we'll let you guys know. But this is definitely one way that you can read with the students. I'll also show you over here in the top right-hand corner, there's these 3 dots, which open up a menus option. If you click on the headphone icon,
She climbs trees.
the story will read for the student.
She sleeps near her mom.
So the students can also listen to a story being read to them. This is not something they have to do with you there. They can do this on their own and kind of report in with you how their reading is going. We will be tracking the reading of anybody in this program. I honestly love this just because it's that natural assessment style. But how can you be supporting as a mentor? Read with them, help them talk about their thinking. How do we know which one's the mom and which one's the baby, right? What do you think the story is going to be about? Why is this the best word to go in the sentence? Asking those kinds of questions is going to be helpful. You can also help them navigate the application. If you get a Lightsail account, it's pretty easy to find the story, open the book, read through it. But if you do have questions about how to navigate or your student struggling, let us know and we'll give you additional support if you get put in this program. I really think it's pretty intuitive. There's a lot of features beyond this that we just won't really use with this population, like the ability to assign fluency checks and homework. So we're asking them to read passages aloud and things like that. If you get really into the reading part with your mentee and want to do more in Lightsail, and it's working well for your students, let us know because we can always give you more to do in that program. And one thing that a lot of people miss is help them with pronunciation. If they're reading too fast or they're mispronouncing the words or they're blending words together, help them practice, stop them, show them how to read it correctly, try reading it for them. So let's go back to that example. If they go, she sleeps near her mom. Let's try it again. She sleeps near her mom. Help them with the pacing. If they struggle on sleeps, say it with them. Sleeps. Sleeps. Have them repeat the word with you. Again, I can't overemphasize enough how important literacy is for this particular population. Another layer of support that we provide, which we've alluded to a little bit already, is social emotional support. But I want to break that down for you. There's 5 areas or themes that we cover throughout our program. Your mentorship coordinator is going to let you know what theme we're in when you join and what kinds of activities you can be doing. But one is self-awareness, and it's all about understanding who you are, getting a sense of identity and belonging, recognizing your strengths and your skills. And we'll talk about how those things should be applied to long-term career pathways. We don't want elementary school students, right, to assume what they're going to be when they grow up. but it's important that they know having a strength could help them in a particular career. So being a good decision maker might help them be a good boss or a study planner. Getting to see that there's pathways to careers and that life happens in a long-term way we can anticipate. That's what we're trying to gauge there. It's something that we can help them with.
And then
Self-management.
another thing
Oh,
really
go ahead, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah, that was another thing that I found to be really interesting over the summer is a lot of these children, a lot of the way you and I probably grew up, people were always asking us, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what are you going to do in 5 years? But a lot of the kids in this population are never asked that because they're just surviving on a day to day or they're used to living that way. So a lot of people have never really had them think about how do you see the world? And what do you think you might want to do to be able to implement the change that you want to see? So it's really fun to ask kids that because a lot of the kids that you might meet really might say, I have no idea. How would I know that? So it's fun to just get them to start thinking about what do they think is wrong with the world, and helping them see paths that they might be able to take to do what they want to do.
Yeah, and part of self-awareness is also like breaking down how you see the world and thinking about how you would see the world differently. And what are the steps that you can take in your own life to represent the changes you want to see in the world? That is definitely part of that social emotional skill of self-awareness. And a lot of students have never been asked to reflect on their own reality. So thinking about what's right or wrong in their life is also new to them. Even before they can anticipate, making positive change, they have to understand where things are broken and should be fixed. Self-management is basically all about regulation. It's all about coping skills. It's about identifying your emotions and being able to handle those emotions. It's about being able to deal with stress or trauma. And again, like we have a lot of curriculum, we have a lot of expertise around self management. So when we get there, we're going to have ideas for you. But one of the great things is that you get to have a one-to-one relationship with a student. And in that relationship, you can tell them about experiences where you've lost your cool or been angry or been scared and how you dealt with that emotion. And that is self-management, right? That's more than what they've been given in the past. Another skill would be social awareness, which is just recognizing how other people are feeling, recognizing what other people are going through and how they're handling their own emotions and how they're acting. And then relationship skills is all about the intersection between self-awareness and social awareness, right? So I know how I'm feeling. I have an obligation to manage my behavior, but I also have to consider empathy and how other people feel in order to connect to those other people. And then there's decision making. So, in the self awareness module, we'll talk a lot about strengths. And in the decision making module, we talk a lot about how those strengths can affect the rest of their lives and can contribute to healthy decisions. What Elizabeth was describing, that idea that students should be asked to consider the world around them and what would make it better, being a person who's constantly making the world better is a decision making process, right? So we talk a lot about that in that module. I just want to highlight one of the reasons we do have this social emotional support as a focus for our program. And that's because students with adverse childhood experiences or who suffer multi-generational trauma often have really poor to zero stress coping mechanisms. So in our after school program, when it's just all refugee kids and very few adults, there's a lot of fights because their go-to response is to either get terrified and hide and run away or to be combative. And we're untraining those learned behaviors constantly. And so social emotional skills are huge for that. A lot of our students have difficulty trusting in authority figures. They don't like to, especially the parents as well, like they don't like to deal with the school system and truancy issues because they feel like the school system is an authority figure that's only there to call them out when they're doing something wrong. And a lot of our students, again, have fled political persecution or organized violence. And so dealing with people in positions of authority can be very triggering. There's also a layer where they have learned how to deal with trauma, and their brain is used to processing trauma in very specific ways. For example, hypervigilance. Does anyone know what that word means, hypervigilance? Elizabeth, you can't answer if you know this one. Does anybody want to guess?
Just being super aware of their surroundings.
Yeah, it's the scientific term for having your guard up, right? So it's just when everything is kind of high alert, where you're just noticing everything, you're paying attention to everything, you're very guarded, you're shut down. When this happens in the brain, what basically happens is your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher order thinking, shuts down and is taken over by your hippocampus. And basically, that's the primitive part of the brain, which just says, hey, we've got to do one of these three things. And if you're not doing that, you're overthinking it. We've got to go into survival mode. Our students are trained by life experiences to default into survival mode. Thanks, Mackenzie, for being willing to answer that one. I appreciate that. So another really difficult offset of this is that our students have difficulty forming strong relationships. And it's for that reason that mentorship is so powerful, because you're getting to have a very strong personal relationship that is in many ways therapeutic for these students. So it's important that you show up when you say you're going to, that you're reliable, that you're present, and that you're really engaged in getting to know that student and understanding them as a human being, and being able to help them become a better human being in all ways. And those kinds of strong, long-lasting relationships are really pivotal in what we call resilience building. Resilience is the capacity to basically survive during trauma without going into your trauma brain, right? And so resilience building activities really help our students overcome those lasting effects of trauma, those long-term effects of trauma. So social emotional support is a huge, huge need for our program. There's also the fun part of getting to do some life skills with your students. I mentioned earlier, like riding a bike, but there's a ton of things that might qualify. Helping them learn to cook a meal, for example, could be a life skill. There's things that are more focused to the school setting, like helping them think of, how to better stay focused during the school day, how to tap into and identify their own motivations, set a schedule for themselves. Like, hey, even though it's the weekend, set a schedule, set alarms to help you get through that schedule. That's a long-term life skill that might have implications for the workplace when they become an adult, right? Set personal goals. Our students haven't considered what a personal goal is before. They've never been asked to think about, like, what do you want and how do you get there, right? That's one of the reasons why projects are really fun to do with these kids, because they have to set goals, they have to stay on schedule, and their motivation comes, from inside themselves. And so that's a really fun way to tap into some of these life skills. Decision making. So there's a lot of overlap here with that social emotional curriculum, communication, but these can show up as, meeting a need the student has, which isn't academic necessarily, but it's just something that they want to know how to do. Again, following their own interests, building relationship. These are all things you can do when you're meeting with your mentee. And,
I'll mention really quick too, sorry, a lot of these soft skills they're super interesting, because a lot of these students are really, really good at looking like they have it together. When you said cooking a meal, these students will probably teach you how to cook a meal, because a lot of them are very, depending on what age they're at, they're very self-sufficient. A lot of these students from a very young age, like some kids who are 10 years old, they wash dishes, they do all their own laundry, they cook for everyone and all their smaller brothers and sisters. So they're pretty good at fooling you that they have it kind of all under control. But when it comes to things like, you can ask them, do you know what a goal is? I remember asking a kid that once, and they thought I was saying goat the whole time. They thought they were making like the sounds like a goat. So they don't really think about things like this. They're, they haven't been asked, as you mentioned, Brandon, to think about a lot of those soft skills. So those are probably going to be the ones that you focus on the most, and that'll be really helpful for them.
Yeah, and we're going to talk in just a little bit about how all of these support mechanisms kind of connect back to each other and what kind of resources we have to help you with this. And I think there's some really neat ones out there. I do want to say that everyone in this program, whether they are a refugee or an undocumented or have just recently come to the country, they've experienced some kind of transience that's brought them here. They've been in constant movement. And one of the things that's hard to deal with when you're in constant movement is forming a sense of identity and a sense of purpose. And so a lot of our students are struggling around those things. And these life skills really help them to find that sense of purpose, really help them to establish their identity. And that fuels right back into the social emotional concepts that we want you covering. Um, and so I wrote this, they often feel incapable of envisioning their best future. Like Elizabeth saying, they've never been challenged to think about that. They've never thought about the word goal. Is it an animal tied to a string that eats your grass? No, it might be setting a plan to cut the grass, but this is just completely new. And because it's so challenging, and because it's out of reach for a lot of our students, they often don't get challenged in this direction and slip into cycles of long-term poverty because they'll take the first low-income job that comes their way and they'll continue to make the least amount of money with very little upward mobility because it's all they know how to do. It's all they've seen their parents do. And so we want to break the cycle of systemic poverty. We want to break the cycle. And to do that, we can use these life skills. We can use students' own interest to help leverage their strengths into a career plan. Every one of you who works in a high school setting is going to be challenged to create a career plan with your students. But I would say even elementary school and middle school students should be challenged to think about, what would you want to be when you grow up? Even if the answer is something rote like, I want to be a police officer. None of them are going to say that, by the way. They're all terrified of cops. But, to use that trope, even if it's something that basic, you're getting them to think about themselves as a successful adult with a long-term sustainable career who's able to contribute to their local community and is civically engaged. So the more we can do that, again, the more effect we're going to have toward their long-term self-sufficiency. We're going to kind of tuck this one in. One thing that the pandemic has really taught us is we're getting a lot of feedback from employers. We're getting a lot of feedback from schools. We're getting a lot of feedback from families that these kids just don't have digital literacy skills. And at the same time, the world has an increasing need for them to have digital literacy skills. So there are ways you can work into your mentorship opportunity, being able to expose them to digital media. If it's a light sail education and they have a tablet in the school building and they're reading with you, that's a digital literacy skill, right? We do have a few programs that are free for you to use that I want to turn you on to. And I'm going to kind of go through them. I'm going to show you examples of them. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but some of the things you can also be doing with your mentor. And again, this isn't every week, it's as you're able and as part of a larger approach to dealing with people as whole people, and not just students who have homework, right? You can be helping them with basic computer skills. I can't tell you guys how many times I got a phone call during the pandemic, hey, my computer stopped working. And they would schedule an appointment with IT through the school system. We would pick them up for the appointment, and they had just never plugged in the laptop because they didn't know to. And they couldn't find the power button or didn't know what a password is. So those basic computer skills are also completely built in vocabulary. What is the mouse? What is the keyboard? Where is the ribbon in a spreadsheet? All of that gets covered in like basic computer skills. So it starts out really easy and then builds in some slightly harder skills. But being able to present material to a classroom using like a slideshow, like we're doing right now, for example, could be a way for you to work on digital literacy. So if they use the internet to research a topic, they could present that topic back to you and other mentors, right? They could present that topic to their school classroom. You could be helping them with an assignment for school that way. One thing that we talked about too was those life skills of like planning, setting a schedule. You can do those inside of spreadsheets. And if they set it up with alarms on their phone, all of that is happening digitally, right? So this technology support should kind of happen organically as you meet these other layers of support. But we want to be paying close attention to making sure that what we're doing has a digital impact and how that digital impact matters. So I'm going to show you a couple of cool things. This is North Star Digital Literacy. And again, we'll send you guys some of these links. I'll make sure, Elizabeth, that you have this material as well. I did not have to log in to get to this page. This is something anybody can get to when they go to North Star for the first time. But if I just go to build my skills, there's 4 areas that I could work with a student on. There's basic computer skills, which I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a moment. Understanding email, Microsoft Word. So you could use this as your platform for writing stories with kids, right? And then career search skills. So this ties right back into that vocational life skill ability. And it's kind of fun to show them how that works. Just to show you what the basic skills part looks like, there's usually a video that they watch. This one goes over like basic parts of a computer, for example. And then they get questions. Click on the desktop
Click on the
computer.
desktop computer. Click on the laptop computer.
Because these are new words to these students.
Click on the
right?
touch screen in the picture.
I won't go through the whole thing, but that's one resource. That's North Star Digital Literacy that you can be using to help build that digital vocabulary with your mentee. Another option is that Google has put together a ton of class material in a system they call Google Applied Digital Skills. And there's so many things that are important for your population, our population, to know. How to create a presentation in a slideshow, how to make a flyer, how to write a story in Google Docs or slides, how to organize files, how to create a schedule. We talked about that, how to create a schedule to meet a goal. Google has a module for that you could use. How to create a budget, that's probably a reach, but if you wanted your student to like create a mock business, for example, and that was an interest of theirs, they could create a budget. How to draw an infographic. There's just research and develop a topic, plan an event. There's so many things that we can be doing with our students from inside these pre-made lesson plans. One is like building healthy digital habits. This could be a whole family lesson about how to turn TV time into healthy time, about like when to turn off your devices. So there's just a lot of different things that we can give you a bit of guidance on, or you can go through and kind of learn for yourself where your students' needs are. But if you realize that there's a family or student need that you don't know how to meet, and you're kind of like, I want to find a way to teach my mentee how to do this, a great place to start is just by going to Google Applied Digital Skills and typing in the skill, and just seeing if something comes up. You can filter by the audience. I'll tell you, late elementary, middle school, high school, some of these are still harder than the age range they might be in for your students, but it's a great place to start. There's even like this back to school training, which you could go through with your mentee to just be like, so the school year just started, how are you doing with it? Let's go through and help get organized, right? Reinforces, again, those life skills. So all of the things we've set up for this program really fuel back into one another. They're interdependent. The last thing that I'll talk about in terms of a support that we want you to offer is just understanding the needs of the whole family. So each week when you meet with your mentee, you're going to be asked to complete a report. Now that report's really short. It's a Google form. It just asks, what did you do this week? Did you do something in this support area? Did you do something in that support area? And at the bottom, there's a place for you to report basic needs. So we do ask that you just check in with the family. If you're going to be in their house for that kind of mentorship in particular, you're going to get to know these things naturally, because they're going to talk about like, hey, can you take me to, they'll ask you like, hey, can you take me to Walmart to get bananas? And the answer might be like, no, I can't do that. But I'm glad to hear that you're trying to get fresh fruit. You have to set boundaries for yourself. But you might learn in talking to them that they have food insecurity, or that they've lost income because someone was fired or can't work, that they have a healthcare concern. If there's something like that going in going on with the family. We want to know because we have wraparound services at NICE that we can provide to that family, whether it's getting them enrolled for healthcare, helping them with mental health services, helping them get cash assistance. There's just all kinds of things that family might be eligible for. So we want to make sure that we're checking in with families about those items. We also want to make sure that you're checking in with your mentee about their mental health and their self-care. This is massively important because no one else is going to ask them these questions. Families from the international community do not typically, they don't prioritize mental health, right? So it's part of our shared obligation to help students recognize that mental health is important and that they should practice good self-care. This is part of that life skill. It's part of social emotional health. And so this is one thing that you can be helping. If there is a healthcare, if there is a mental health need, or they talk to you about an issue with their family that is sensitive in one of these categories, there's a place to report that to Hannah, the coordinator for mentorship, and then she can pass that information along to a benefits navigator or a cash assistance navigator or a mental health care provider, and help that person get the need that they, help meet the need that they have. Another thing that I just want to make sure that everyone understands is that child abuse is a very dangerous thing right now. By all accounts, we're at an all-time high for reported child abuse cases. And this is something that happens a lot in the immigrant community because there's cultural, there's cultural norms that are different in the areas these students are coming from. I can't tell you specific stories, but we've had this happen where parents think that they're doing right by their kids by practicing a certain kind of discipline because it's what they grew up with. And then when they find out that in the United States that is considered child abuse, they try to change their practice. They try to grow. They try to learn, well, what is best for my kid? How can I be a good parent? Because no one ever trained them how to do this the right way. Nobody trains most parents how to do this the right way. And so at that point, we can step in and help that family, but we can only help that family if we know there's an issue. In the state of Tennessee, we are a mandatory reporter state. So if we suspect child abuse, you must report it to the Department of Child Services. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. There is a phone number we will provide you if you suspect child abuse. You can also go online and do an online ticket where you report child abuse. You can also let me, Elizabeth, or Hannah know what's going on. And we can make that report for you if you don't feel comfortable doing so. I'll tell you, one of the strongest relationships that NICE maintains is with the victim's advocate within the Metro Nashville Police Department, because the victim's advocate is a civilian side position in the police department, and they're responsible for fielding these claims about child abuse, sorry. So most of the time, if we suspect child abuse, I'll go straight to the police department to talk to them about it myself so that the family's not under implications, but that we can help resolve the issue in a way that's healthy for everyone and still inform the local authorities so that we know that there's resolution. Without there being like punitive consequences for the family, which might make the situation worse, right? So that's a heavy topic. I'll tell you that another thing we deal with a lot in the immigrant community is interpartner violence and domestic abuse. So those are also things that if you get a sense that that's happening, definitely share that with the mentorship coordinator. We are trained as a team to deal with these situations because they arise quite frequently in the population that we serve. Any questions about basic needs support, tech support, any of the scopes of services? I know we've covered a lot.
I know you've talked about their literacy levels being low, but how, I mean, I guess it depends student to student, but how is their English speaking skill?
Yeah, it does depend. It does depend widely on the student. And I'll tell you, a lot of the times, if you are serving a student in a family, they have siblings, they have neighbors that are going to be around as well. So you're not necessarily in a vacuum. This community really, I would say, leans into community-based support. and that idea of neighborliness in a very unique way. So for some of the students, it is a little hard. Oftentimes there's a sibling or someone in the family that can help like translate, help you get your point across as you're working with students. I think there's very few students that have such a little English ability that you can't talk to them. But I will tell you, like, it might start out simple, like, hello, my name Mackenzie. What is your name? Because our students will regularly drop things like linking verbs and such. It's important to kind of mirror that as they get their language development along. But Elizabeth has firsthand experiences this as someone who's untrained with the EL population who stepped into the summer camp program. So what do you think, Elizabeth?
I was going to say too, I know you said it varies widely. It really does. There was a little girl who was about 8 years old who had way higher literacy levels than a lot of the 14-year-olds. So it really does vary. I would say that you have to be careful sometimes in your delivery because we're not a lot of us are not very used to speaking to people with a literacy level this low. So you kind of have to catch yourself when you try to get a little bit too complicated and you start to get that look. I've found that just trying to simplify what I'm saying to just one step at a time. You can usually get on the same page. You can also just use your resources. Sometimes it takes Googling a picture of what you're talking about. And then if you can show them that, they're like, oh, yeah. So just things like that. Also, we do have translation tools. And even though, obviously the goal is English literacy, a lot of times if a student is frustrated and they really just can't get across what they're trying to say to you, they'll just go on their phone or whatever, or they'll ask you to pull up a translation app and then they can just speak right into it and you can at least see what they're trying to say. So, in my personal experience, I've never felt like completely at a loss, like we just have no idea what we're trying to say to each other. But yeah, it does vary really wildly. So of course you always, there's some funny situations that arise, but I think just by trying to simplify as much as you can, showing pictures, videos, translation apps, you can always find some common ground. So.
Yeah, and try to, I would say another thing, and we'll kind of, there's a whole part of this training tonight too, which is just talking about English language learners in general. One thing that I would say is reframe the way you're trying to convey something. So try to say things in multiple different ways, use those visual supports like Elizabeth was saying. You'll kind of learn a little bit about the students naturally just by staying around them. And the way the brain works, we want to connect to what we call prior knowledge, activate prior knowledge. So sometimes it's as important as getting to know, like, okay, where are you from? What might you have seen in your culture? And if you do get stuck, that's what Hannah is for. That's what I'm for. That's what Elizabeth's for. Let us know that you're struggling to communicate, and we might be able to help you with some strategies as well. Any other questions before we move on? Thanks for sharing those personal experiences, Elizabeth. I know that's super exciting. And this is a great segue because we do have a little bit of conversation here about best practices for these English learners. I will say this part of the training was written by a former staff member, and I've really tried to do some cleaning up here, but it's the presentation is language heavy. So I'm going to try to trim this down a little bit in our presentation of the material. As you can see, there's a lot of words on the screen here. So I'm going to try to highlight the intention here. And Elizabeth, we can share this out with people afterwards, the PowerPoint, if you guys want to look at this into more detail level. But, being an English learner, what we constantly talk about is we don't want to have a deficit mindset about our students. We don't want to think about English language learning as a disability. Our students often know 3, 4, 5 languages before they come into the United States. Their language skills can be strong. Typically, their written language skills and their understanding of grammar and mechanics is very low. But our students have a lot of diverse experiences. And because of that, they typically are invaluable to the school system. They're invaluable to the local landscape of where we live. And so we need to treat our children as a commodity, as something to be admired and valued. right? At NICE, our t-shirt says diversity is a strength, and we live that mantra. So, English learners bring immense cultural resources to the education experience, and it's our kind of job to pull that out and highlight it and live in it. So get to know your students. I know that the language barrier is intimidating, but you're going to learn their strengths. You're going to learn their background. You're going to learn their culture, and it's going to be so much fun to do so. Um, a lot of students do not want to learn English because English is hard. It's foreign to them, literally foreign to them. And because of that, they shy away from it, but not everyone. So don't go in thinking they're going to be afraid to learn the language. Some of them get really excited about it. And I'll give you another like language anecdote since we're kind of on that. Right now, we had a student who kept saying like, how did he put it? I'm stupid. He was saying like, I'm stupid about this. Like, I'm stupid when it comes to this, or I'm stupid when it comes to this. Well, it turns out that that's because of a language barrier, because in Swahili, when you're ignorant about something, the word that you use for it is stupid. And he was just trying to say, I don't know. And we carried over a cultural connotation that doesn't exist in his own culture. And so it's easy to bring deficit mindset into a relationship where your students might not feel that deficit. They might just be trying to get to know the language and get to know the skill. And we have to be careful to like give them the space to succeed. Many students, again, don't have access to formal education. And if they do, the kind of school we give them is really different. Every student is unique. We've mentioned that over and again. And all of our students are capable of higher level thinking. What we have to do is creatively work around the language barrier to get them to talk about their thinking. And so, I would say only around 2/3 of active ELs graduate high school. That number's much lower for SIFE students. We're not going to watch this video just for time's sake. But recent arrivals have an uphill battle. That's really what this is all talking about. So what can we take in mind? We've said it before. I'll say it again really briefly. Get to know your students, get to know their needs, get to know their interests, get to know their preferences. Visuals, Elizabeth talked about that. Talk with your hands. Have a sentence frame. So when you're working with someone on writing, for example, you could introduce the idea of a need. They might not think about a need critically, right? They might know the word need, but you might say like, what is a need versus a want? So let's do a sentence frame. I need blank. And then ask them like, what do you need? What do you have to have? And they might write like, I need games or toys. I'm like, do you need a toy? Are you going to die without a toy? Have fun with it. And eventually they'll get the idea of, oh, I need water, I need food, I need shelter. And so using sentence stems can really help break down that language barrier as well. And a sentence stem, just so you know, is a tool where it's part of a sentence where words are left out. So you're asking them to fill in the blank instead of just make a whole sentence on their own. Again, it's all about relationship building. It's all about safe environment. So as long as you are practicing vulnerability and getting to know them and being encouraging of them, they're going to take risks and they're going to try. As often as possible, like I said earlier, model correct English. So if they're not reading a sentence in a story correctly, reread it with them, have them practice it. It's very important that if you make a mistake, you model, oh, you know what? I said that wrong. Let's try again. I got it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong. Let's do it over. So recasting is what we call that in education. Then the most important thing to establishing a relationship with someone where there's a language barrier is just to go slow. Wait. Wait time is super important. If you ask a question and they don't answer you right away, sit back and just wait. How are you feeling today? And if it takes them 5 minutes to answer, that's okay, right? Because they know that you care about that answer. And if they don't have anything to say, it's okay to be silent sometimes. Read aloud, use the story, look at those context clues. So like if I'm asking, how do we know the baby panda versus the mama panda? There might be something in the picture that's a context clue. There might be something in the language of the story that's a context clue. Language buds. So if you happen to know another language, let us know about it. And if something is too hard or too difficult, or you can't get your point across, don't be afraid to let it go. right? That's important too, is knowing where the boundary is. So if I'm trying to build a relationship with Daya and I just can't get my point across, I may be like, you know what, let's go on to something different. It's okay. And again, keep it simple, like we talked about before. Use a word bank and sentence stems when you're writing. So if you do ask for a writing assignment, if you want to do some writing with your students, give them some vocabulary they can plug in, just like a Mad Lib almost, but you want the answers to actually make sense at the end, right? So give them open-ended sentences where you're starting and leaving blanks. Give them a word bank where they can plug those blanks in. Let them try to fill that language out as best as possible. So we're going to skip breakout rooms because there's just not that many of us tonight. But I do want, let me go back and just say, I do want you to be considering as you get prepared for this experience, what makes a successful mentor? What can I do as a mentor that would be successful for my students? Think about ideas that you're already starting to have in the back of your mind about the different scope of services we talked about, whether it be how you can support technology or how you might ask those difficult questions like, do you have enough food this week? Most of those kinds of things the family's going to offer to you, but it might even be like, how am I going to make homework exciting? Because I know my kids are not going to want to do it when I meet with them. And then be thinking about this too. After this, if you feel like there's a gap in what you'll need to be a successful mentor, ask, like bring that up to us. Let us know if there's additional resources you would like to have before meeting with your family for the first time. Let's jump right in because I want to try to end on time and we have a few more things to get through. We're going to go through the volunteer expectations for the program. We do ask that you make a minimum of 9-week commitment. The reason for that, again, is all around trust building. It's all around reliability. We want mentees to have a consistent experience with one person they're really connecting with. For that reason, we do ask that you're available for 2 hours a week. If it's not 2 hours during the school day, it might be an hour in the morning one day and time spread throughout the week, touching base with that student to really help them. And Mackenzie, like you mentioned earlier, it might be like a number of different ways you meet with the family to make that time up. We do ask that you log your hours and track it forward. So Elizabeth's going to make sure that everyone has a track it forward account. This is where you just go at the end of your mentorship. You're going to do 2 things. You're going to log your hours and track it forward, and you're going to log your activities in your mentor report so that we can stay aware of how the relationship's going. We also ask that you have a consistent communication with NICE staff about those family needs. So if, for example, they need cash and they're not making rent, that's something we need to know because there might be a resource we have that can help them. There might not, but it's important to know the narrative, right? If we don't have money to help them, we might have clothes and donations or school supplies where we can offset some of the natural costs they're incurring. We do ask that if you stay for longer than 9 weeks, you make yourself available to ongoing trainings. We're going to have quarterly trainings for all of our programs where we're digging into new skills and going deeper into this content to make you a better mentor. That's something that Elizabeth and I are going to get really creative about working together on. So we hope that those trainings are going to be really valuable for you in your volunteer experience, and we hope that you show up for them. We would love for nothing more than everybody who goes through this training and stays with us for years, like some volunteers do, and really gets to know their family and really gets to be a deeper, more impactful mentor because of the time they spend with us. We also ask that you have a degree of flexibility with us. It's an ongoing public health crisis. Families are sometimes hard to engage. They're sometimes unresponsive. So getting paired with the right family may take a little bit of time. We can only pair you with someone when we have a family who's ready to be paired. And so it may take a little while for you to get your right match. If you're doing in-home mentorship, it may be difficult to schedule a time that consistently works. And so you might have to have flexibility in that sense. The other thing is that people are people. They're sometimes hard to deal with. And so there's sort of that cognitive flexibility that's also important. We ask that you be the calm, responsible, cool adult at all times and help the family even when they might be feeling heightened, because typically kids are important to us. We want to see them do their very best. That's even more exacerbated in a community that's this marginalized. So there's a lot of high emotions that run with dealing with young people in refugee and immigrant families. I do have just a few policies and procedures, and I apologize. I know I'm going kind of fast through this, but I don't want us to end late. And I know we have a lot to cover, and hopefully we've said a lot of this more than once at this point. So the schedule is flexible for this program. It is set by the mentor and the student. If you are volunteering during the school day, you will need to schedule with Metro Nashville Public Schools. We will help you do that. You'll also have to pass that fingerprint background check, and Elizabeth has the process for that if that's the kind of mentorship experience you want to have. We do adhere to Metro Nashville Public School System's breaks. So if it's fall break or spring break or there's a teacher workday, we're not meeting with that family. There are remote versus in-person services like we talked about before. If you are in person, it's very important that you stay masked, that you use either a face shield or a mask and gloves if possible. We will provide those materials if you don't have them. But we do ask that before you go into the family's home, you do a temperature check with that family to make sure that nobody has COVID if you can, or ask them about their symptoms. We got a really great CDC symptom flyer yesterday that I'm going to share with everybody. I should have pulled it for this, but I didn't. I can pull it up at the end if there's time. But it's just visuals about like what's coughing, what's loss of sense of smell. And so go through that, make sure that you're being responsible about your own public health and that you know everybody in the family seems well before you go into their home. Use your best judgment, right? We're not going to be the mass police for you, but we want to make sure that you understand that if one of us were to go into a family's home and we had the virus and we're carrying it, the marginalized population that we serve is going to be more affected than we are. So a lot of these families are single earner households. So if a parent gets sick and can't go to work, they've lost all their income. Like I said, we've had clients die from this virus. We've had the sole money earner in a family die from this virus, and it's very impactful on the rest of the family. So be responsible when you are in person. As I mentioned, mentors will complete that Fowler background check, which is URL based. Elizabeth will provide you with a link for that if she hasn't already. But if you're meeting in school, you have to do the fingerprint. The way that works is you go into a physical location to do your fingerprint, and they will charge you $32.65, and we will pay that immediately back to you when you provide us with a receipt. I wish that I had a way to give you all my credit card to do it ahead of time, but we haven't found a way to work that out with the school system. So right now we are able to do cost reimbursement, but with the turnaround time to get a check written or get cash back into your hand is pretty short. Most of you, if you do this, will get reimbursed in cash. Every one of you, if you haven't done so already will fill out a HIPAA form. This just says that you understand you might learn private health information about the family and working so closely with them, and that you're not going to share that information with anyone who is not essential on their case. So you might be able to let Elizabeth know, you might be able to let Hannah know, but you might not have to let me know, for example, a health issue with the family, or if there's someone else that you have a relationship with outside of NICE and you're talking about the student's life or some of your experiences, just be careful not to inadvertently share that sensitive health information or sensitive education information that might compromise the family. You are not expected to be on call 24/7. The closer you get to the family, the more they're going to ask of you. And it's really important that you set firm boundaries with them. These are the times of the week I can come. This is the scope of what I'm going to be able to do. I can try to help connect you to more services, but I can't guarantee we'll be able to do everything for you. Setting that boundary at the very front, Hannah's going to help with that because she'll meet with the family before you do. But it's really important that you reinforce those boundaries, or they will try to get every little bit of help they can, which is understandable for people in dire situations. Mentor reporting. Every time that you meet with a mentor, we do ask that you submit a report within 24 hours, be as detailed as possible. And I'm going to show you a copy of that mentor report before you leave tonight. So we'll go through it together. Some of the questions may change to match the supports we talked about in today's training, but I'll show you roughly what that mentor report looks like. The URL link and how you fill it out is always going to be the same. We also say that if you choose to meet in person, NICE is not liable for sickness or injury that may occur. So we do ask that you fill out, if you're going to do in-home mentorship or at-school mentorship, we do ask that you fill out a COVID-19 release waiver saying that you're willing to take that responsibility. And we'll explain to you guys what kind of check-in process the school system requires if you want to meet in the school during the day. And when we do the recording, I'll speed all of that up so I sound like a little chipmunk. Can we go through? No. So let's look at the mentor report. This is a Google form, which means it's a living document that we all get a chance to work in. Every time you go in, the form is unique. It automatically submits at the end. And this is also how we make referrals to outside support services. So if there's a mental health need or there's a need for particular services, we'll use your recommendations from your report to make those referrals. It should be completed 24 hours after you meet with your mentor, or sorry, your mentee. We do ask that at least every week you have an academic focus. So whether that's working on your homework or doing a little writing activity, something about your experience should always be academic. Those other focuses are kind of up to you to work in as you see fit with your mentee based on their needs. So let's look at an example. So here's the mentor report. Once we get mentees to pair you with, we'll put their name in. Let me show you what it looks like from your end. So you'll put your email in and you'll choose the name of the person that you're working with. I have to give something here. So at that point, you're going to get questions about specific elements. Like, what did you do for tech this week? And you can write a short description like, oh, this week we got on the tablet, or maybe we didn't do anything, right? What did you do? I'm going to rename this one. What did you do for life skills or career focus? You'll write in a short description. What did you do for your academic focus? We might give you some options to choose from, or you can just briefly describe the activities that you did, whether they be literacy or reading, whatever it might be. You'll just write a short description. And then for basic needs support, which I don't know why, here we go. For basic needs support, if you think there's a service that they might qualify, or you want to tell us something that's going on, you can type other and just say like the family is experiencing food insecurity. You don't have to be familiar with all these programs, but if you think they might qualify for food stamps, or they've said, I need help with my food stamps application, check that box. We have someone that can help them. I want to apply for TANF. Even if you don't know what TANF is, we can help. You might want to apply for health insurance. They might need unemployment. They might need financial assistance. So anything that you find out about the family, we're asking that you use this checklist or the other option to provide to HANA so that we can follow up for referrals. And that's the mentor report. It's super easy. At the very end, it will tell you that it's been submitted. HANA will get an automatic copy and we will take it from there. The only way that we know whether or not you have actually met with your student each week, the way we take attendance for this program, are these mentor reports. So it's super important that you submit one. You can see there's been 92 responses this year alone. That's great. That's a lot of students served, a lot of services happening. We're excited about that. But there might have even been undocumented events that took place with mentors because reports weren't submitted. So it's really important that we get that data. Okay, we're getting to the last bend in the curve here. So last bend in the road. What's the next step? Elizabeth is going to check in with you all about your availability. You are going to get to sign one of those background checks. Either it's going to be the Fowler's background check if you're working in home or virtually with a family, or the MMPS background check if you're working in a school. You'll sign that HIPAA form saying that you're going to protect that private health information or identifiable personal information. You will also sign a liability form that includes implications about the virus. You will then be matched with a student. This part might take some time. So be gracious, be patient with Elizabeth and HANA as they look for the right family for each of you all. mentorship gets referrals from new arrivals, from elementary school students, from high school students. There's just lots of possibility. But we want to make sure you have the right family and that that family's also gone through the enrollment process of doing paperwork and filling out waivers and signing releases as well. So there is sort of a wait time that's longer for mentorship, but your experience is going to be so much deeper than everyone else's. So be patient. It is worth the wait. Then the next step from there is to begin meeting with the family and log those hours over Track It Forward and your mentor reports. So now that I've speed rambled through all of the logistics and done my chipmunk voice kind of poorly, what questions do you all still have?
So when we get paired, will we get like information about the family, anything that you already know about them? Is that like a packet that we're gonna get? And then with that, will we also get maybe just this slideshow, but something that like has all of the resources that we talked about today that we can easily access?
Yeah, it will be something like this. And I think Elizabeth and I will go back through the slideshow and just try to determine what we still owe you guys in terms of like links or resources or handouts to use. Ongoingly, Hannah's going to be providing you with activities as well, just so that you have things in your back pocket. They won't always work for every student, right? Because we have such a wide variety. But she might say like this week, try to do a self-image activity, so here are a few options. And then you get to kind of customize it for whatever works best with your audience. I would say right now, the process, because we're kind of pairing people slowly, is going to be that Hannah will meet with you and tell you all about the family and kind of introduce you to them. And she will probably go with you to your first mentorship experience. Elizabeth, it's a great question. And as we get even more people signed up for this program, we probably want a more automated way to do that pass off. But because right now we're kind of dealing with a small amount of volunteers for the program, Mackenzie, we can give you that customized experience. Any other questions?
Would it be possible to have access to the slideshow as well? Because I thought like there's a lot of information in there, but it was really good.
Yeah, and if you guys want to go back and watch that video, it's a good one. The reason I didn't play it is it sometimes takes a long turn to buffer. So when we send you that, that will be embedded as well. And I'll go back and link the Google Applied Digital Skills and North Star links as well. So they're not just tabs I thumbed to, but hyperlinks in the PowerPoint before we send it out.
All right, thank you.
And if anyone can ask any other questions you have as well, but I just wanted to add a couple things about the kids. I'm really excited for you all to, it sounds like a lot of information in the beginning, but once you actually paired with a student that you get to focus on getting to know them, it's just such a fun experience. A lot of these kids they love music, they love to sing and dance, they like want to do all kinds of different things. A lot of them want to be YouTubers, some of them want to be famous soccer players. And then one of my favorite elementary school girls went around telling everyone that she wants to be a famous writer and a famous reader. And none of us really had the heart to tell her that that's not a thing, because she was so excited to get better at reading, because she said she wants to do that so she can help everybody in the world who doesn't know how to read. So there's just so much to love about the kids that you're going to get to know, and it's going to be a really exciting process. So just bear with us on all of the logistic hoops to kind of hop over in the beginning.
Hey, if we can make influencer a job that actually pays well, we can make famous reader a job. We'll have to work on that one. That's a great story, Elizabeth. Thanks for sharing. We got a few more minutes here. Any other questions before we let you guys go?
I guess just because we have some time,
Yeah.
Is there like any sort of activities where like volunteers get together ever? Like, is it all just kind of you're on your own, you fill out the mentorship form, or is there anything like in person?
Yeah, that's a great question. Elizabeth, do you want to talk about where we're at with that, or I can jump in and talk about the vision if you want?
Yeah, so the idea is, you can also jump in, Brandon, but the idea is that we would love to have as much of that as we can because we know that, sometimes you kind of feel out there by yourself and you kind of want to know how the other volunteers are dealing with things that are coming up, and how the other mentors are coping as well. So the idea is we want to try to have, group coffee sessions with the other volunteers and mentors, just opportunities to get together, and just kind of check in with everyone else, get some advice. Obviously, it's a little tricky right now because COVID things. We're just kind of feeling out. We'd love to have those things be in person if possible, because of course people like to go to those more. But if that's not possible, we'll have little virtual kind of coffee hours online too, periodically, that we'll send out invites for to make sure that you guys are getting an opportunity to check in with everyone else and kind of see, if they have any insight and share some of your experiences too.
Yeah, and I'll also make a pitch for there is a volunteer Facebook group on NICE's website. And Elizabeth, we could even have that be a place people go and post questions like, hey, I'm volunteering and I'm having this issue. Who knows? So that can be a little online community as well. But that's exactly right. I mean, the vision is that we're getting together very often. We've done a couple of virtual events called happier hours, and maybe like 2 or 3 people have showed up. If we had more participation from all of you guys, they would be so much fun, because I've been to ones where there's like 20 people, and one time we even like split it up where every breakout room was a room of the house, and every room of the house had like a different icebreaker you had to answer and kind of go through the room like you're at a house party. It was a lot of fun. It still wasn't a house party. It's still not what we want it to be, but there, if we can get participation at those things, they're a lot more fun than you might think, even though it's stuck at your computer longer than you want to be.
As someone who works in social media for a living, I am happy to jump in and help there however I can too.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for noticing that, or for naming that, Sydney. We definitely we use the Later app and have like a PR program and a development team, but we would definitely be happy to have you plug in with that group and exercise your expertise there as well.
Yeah, definitely reach out to me, Sydney, if you have, some suggestions for events that could be fun like that. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, awesome.
This is why I tried to rush through, is to give us some time on the back end for you guys. So any question that's on your mind, and if not, we can head out early and get you guys some of these resources even sooner.
So I know there's the 9-week commitment, and I would plan on doing longer than that, but what about like if I'm on vacation for a week or something? Like, that's fine, right? I just talk to the family about it and everything.
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of the times for our other trainings, we do talk about like finding a sub or something like that. But for this, it's between you and the family. So if you let the family know your plans and communicate to them ahead of time, like, hey, I can't be here next week, I'm going to be in Vermont having maple syrup, or whatever it is, that is definitely acceptable, Mackenzie. Totally.
Funny, because so I'm moving to Nashville from New Hampshire, so I spent a lot of time in Vermont. This is a funny example to give.
Completely off the cuff, so love it. And I would say that the in-school mentorship opportunities probably do have a little more, again, because they have more structure. Probably want to let Hannah know ahead of time if that's what you're going to do as your opportunity, so that we can let the teachers know you're not going to be there, or find someone to step in to be with that group. Because typically what we're going to do is you have your designated student that you're going to meet the family for and be involved in outside of school, but you might pull that child and others out of the classroom all at once to kind of do a little small group activity, so that other kids are getting some of our services as well. But that you're always pulling that one student that you're paired with. So this is a great example of wait time and how we've gotten some awesome results out of it. But I think we'll go ahead and end there. Elizabeth and I will work on this PowerPoint for the next few minutes. We'll send it out to you guys with the correct hyperlinks and get you to have the HIPAA form and background checks sent back to us. So thank you guys all for being such engaged participants this evening. I know being away from each other is not fun. I love to do these in person. We'll get to do some hopefully soon, but I appreciate you guys still being ongoingly responsive to the public health crisis and meeting us on Zoom tonight. So thank you so much. Elizabeth, do you have anything else to add before we adjourn?
I think that's it. I think I did all my emotional, hard-hitting pitch. So thank you all. It was really great to have you guys with us, and we're really excited to get you started.
Have a great evening, everyone. We really, really appreciate you joining us. And again, we will share the PowerPoint, the recording, and resources with you after this. We look forward to getting your information and to seeing you work with your mentees soon. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.